ideally, the reason why I do that is because not only am I living my purpose, and you know, I don't have to worry about the office politics and such, but I do it because I want to constantly be learning. What makes me good at my role is because I've collected a bunch of contexts from all the different situations that I've been in, and I can take those and adapt them to the current projects or programs that I'm working on. And I think Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Good, Lynette. Good to see you again. And yeah, so how are things in Toronto these days? Everybody optimistic about the Leafs? And I'm not sure. We're never sure exactly when the podcast is going to play, but I'm assuming that I sure can't talk about the Oilers. That's one thing I can tell you for sure.
Oh, well, okay. Well, you know what? That's a great segue, actually, Lauren, into our today's subject about being on top of the game. So
Yeah, no
apparently
kidding.
the Oilers aren't.
No, they're not.
So, Lauren, we've been talking about sort of reinventing ourselves and that continual need to learn new skills in some of our other podcasts. So this podcast, we want to talk a little bit more about how we can help our listeners recognize when they're on top of their game and when it's time to do something, well, to recognize when you're on top of the game, but also to then to say, okay, well, what's next? Not just sitting there at the top, because we know that in most cases, what ends up happening is you kind of go through this phase, right? So the phases
Yeah.
are, you go through a learning phase of starting something new, and it gets a little bit messy. The second phase is, wow, you're in this really growth phase where, you know, you've taken and you've learned and you've started and you're really kind of growing and you're sitting there enjoying finally all the fruits of your labor. But then eventually and inevitably, everything then becomes or starts to take a decline. So in business and in our own personal and professional lives. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So Lauren, you got any sort of insights to that?
Yeah, you know, when I was a CEO of a mobile technology company that was in the data business, the company really was, when I first joined the company, really at the top of its game. We had a huge part of our business that was around refurbishment and repair of hardware, and the margins were huge. It was a great business. And we knew that the technology was going to change and that business was going to change. But every time we went to look at the business plan and you look to make the switch to a new business model, it was so uncomfortable to leave. It was so uncomfortable and it was very hard. And we eventually did, but I think we waited too long.
Right.
Like we knew a couple of years before that this was going to change, because a lot of that equipment was riding on old, kind of an old software platform. We knew Microsoft was coming with a new Windows-based platform that was going to fundamentally take and change these devices and the software to the point that was going to cut the price in half and was going to make the refurbish and repair model almost obsolete. We knew it, but it was so hard, Lynette, because we had all this pipeline of business. We had all this stuff, and the salespeople were so lined up to do it. And we were so used to making these great margins, and to convince ourselves to let go was really hard. And as a CEO, I had a responsibility, and I tried to lead that charge. I think I could have done better. I think I should have forced it to happen earlier. We eventually did it, but it was way more painful when we did it because we were coming from behind.
Exactly. And I think you make a really good point, because, you know, sometimes I think about starting something new or starting, and I'm just like, oh God, do I want to go through that when I just finished going through already? It's so hard. And it's just, oh, can't I just sit here and enjoy? But I don't think it even runs in parallel when you think about those phases of, you know, startup, growth, and then decline. I think that you've got to be thinking right in that growth phase, what is the next step? So as that current growth goes down, your other growth phase starts right away. So I think you've got to be running a lot of things in parallel. And I think that that's an exact point. So you sit there and you wait and you wait and you wait, but then, like you said, it becomes too late. So wouldn't it be cool if everybody just sort of was able to really kind of allow themselves that sort of opportunity to recognize that, and to force yourself almost to always be continually looking to how you're going to sort of continue on that growth.
You know what, for our listeners and our audience that are hearing us talk, there might be some people that might be saying, I mean, aren't we ever satisfied with anything? Like, I mean, like we're as content in this world. But we're not really talking about accumulating more, right? We're not talking about trying to buy more stuff, right? Or it's really more around personal advancement. But isn't it sometime, don't you think sometime that people might just say, oh, geez, when is enough? And I think, I think we're making the argument that, that it's never, that if this, once you decide that whether you even want to or not, you can't sit still because the world's not sitting still around you, right?
Exactly. One of the one of the better things I've read over the past few months is Patty McCord's book. She was the right-hand woman from an HR perspective at Netflix.
Right.
Some people say she's been, she was fired from her job, but regardless, their philosophy was very much making sure that people were serving their purpose for the organization, and that when their particular purpose for that organization was sort of coming to an end, to help them move on to something different. And I think that, that's sort of kind of what we're talking about here, where their philosophy was to make Netflix a really great place to come from, or to have worked and to come from. And I think that it almost forced you to continually, as an employee there, to continually up your game and to continually grow. And then when your sort of purpose or your growth opportunities were no longer as ample there, then it was time to kind of move on. And I think it's to psychologically be okay with that,
Yeah, very good point. I've heard Patty talk, and I've heard her talk about that. LinkedIn, I've heard the CEO of LinkedIn has the same philosophy. Kind of, they talk about tour of duty.
Yeah.
When your assignment's done, you're done. It's okay. It's okay to be from somewhere. And I think personally, if we kind of have a mindset that look, when things are going great, when you're at the best, you can either go in and go, you know what, I'm not saying you shouldn't enjoy it. I think you need to sit and revel in the fact and appreciate it. But also the indication, the antenna should go up, and now it's time to go and see what's next and how I move myself to another level, which though has a degree of discomfort and it's messy. Like, even if you don't mind me just saying it, you were talking about you're going to a new workout place from where you were before.
Right.
Even to make that courage to go and do that. I mean, it's not like but you got to go to a different place. You got to go through a whole different routine. I hear you talk about it, and it's not comfortable, right? You didn't just go jump in and all of a sudden, well, you talk about it. You're the one doing it. But don't you think it's a little bit metaphorical?
Yeah. And I think so the metaphor there is that I felt like I was plateauing. So that I didn't see any more improvement in me physically at the current location. And I think that's kind of very similar. Like sometimes, I mean, I guess, even when I bring it to my work, I work on contract, on consulting type gigs. They typically end up being a couple of years long, which is not sort of what the right way should be if I was going to be a consultant. It just so happens that people just kind of keep me on. But ideally, the reason why I do that is because not only am I living my purpose, and I don't have to worry about the office politics and such, but I do it because I want to constantly be learning. What makes me good at my role is because I've collected a bunch of contexts from all the different situations that I've been in, and I can take those and adapt them to the current projects or programs that I'm working on. And I think if I didn't have that opportunity to change jobs all the time, I wouldn't have as much context. And to continue on with that, I remember when I first started my full-time career, it was at CIBC, and I started out as a part-time bank teller, to be honest. And one of the senior executives, Linda Holhall, she was an amazing woman. I'll never forget when she said to me, Lynette, change jobs every 2 years, whether it's laterally or, sort of up the ladder. But just to always continually grab that context. I didn't understand maybe exactly what that meant, but I knew it was coming from somebody pretty smart and pretty awesome. So I thought, okay, I just grabbed onto that, I just grabbed onto it as gospel. And it has really been a powerful thing for me, because to that point around context, you can't really sort of like, how well can you actually contribute to something when you don't have the context to bring to the table, or even that growth that allowed me. It allowed me a tremendous amount of growth.
You know what? I think it's a fool's paradise. And I think for our listeners out there, so here maybe a contribution we could make to you is to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So if you've been out there and sitting in a job for a period of time, because I think it's important to get competent in something, right? I think when you've been around for a few years, at least you can really kind of get in and do something.
Yeah.
So I think that's important too. But if you've been doing the same job over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
and even though you're getting a 5-star rating or whatever it is, and you're comfortable and you know it inside out, I think that's a danger sign. I think that is when the time you should start asking yourself, okay, how do I kind of now take that base and reinvent myself and take myself to another level?
Yeah.
So, I think to be in control of that, to do it with intention, even though when you start to do something different, you might say, why the hell did I do that? Why, what the hell's wrong with me? Why did I do that? I think the worst position is to have it done to you.
Yeah, exactly.
You get surprised and someone says, we've decided to do a little bit different around here. You've been great. And,
it hits me like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Now you're coming from behind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a little bit more uncomfortable. So I know you raised this topic with me and around being an important one, and I'm really glad you did. I think there isn't a whole bunch of profound action steps that you can take. On the other hand, having the mindset to do it, I think the one thing though that people don't often talk about is to acknowledge that it is not only uncomfortable, but it's kind of messy for a while.
Yeah. And be uncomfortable, right? So get comfortable with being uncomfortable, kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's messy. It's kind of like when you move, there are boxes around all over. It takes a while for the pictures to get hung up, and it's messy.
Yeah.
It's literally messy.
But it always works out. It always does. So Lorne, so the key takeaway, I love what you said there, is like, if you've been in a role, just sort of think about where you are in your life right now, and say to yourself, have I been in this role a long time, and am I getting these killer kind of ratings? Then, you're probably right. It's time to start to challenge myself to do something more. Also then just sort of ask yourself, what could I challenge myself with, and what could I take sort of a reinvention approach to, or just sort of changing my game a little bit. Anything else from
Yeah, well, I could just say it's a personal thing for me right now. I mean, I've gone from being an executive in a fairly good sized company, and I move into this next phase of my life, and I'm trying to reinvent myself in that context, and it's messy, and it's uncomfortable, and it's exhilarating on one hand too, because it's kind of exciting to think about where it might go. It's not, I just would reinforce that we're not talking about easy, and we're not talking about never being content. I guess we're saying to redefine and reframe contentness, and to make being messy and reinventing yourself as part of being content. I mean, it's almost a contradiction. Is that's part of who I am as a human being, to continue to do that. And I think when we reframe it that way, it puts us more frankly in control to lead it in ourselves. It's just who we are. That's the way I feel about it. Great
That's awesome, Lorne. Thanks for partaking in that conversation today. I just thought it was something that was just something that, just a bit of an aha moment for me. So wanted to share with you.
Yeah, thanks for putting it on the table. Look forward to our next conversation.
Sounds good. Have a great day.
Bye. You too.
Bye.
Bye.